each other through it. Come on and see, good movement draws good movement.
Welcome to Good Movement Draws Good Movement, the podcast where farmers, ranchers, and rural folks can grow relationally through awareness, understanding, and effective communication. Hey, it's T. I'm your host, and I, along with my guests, will be covering topics related to drawing good movement. Things like self and social awareness, brain science, positive psychology, extending grace, and so much more. We'll share tools that can help you understand why you are the way you are, why others are the way they are, and how you can use that to step out of self-told lies with grace and compassion to draw good movement in conversations, relationships, and life in rural America. Let's go draw good movement. Welcome back to the Good Movement Draws Good Movement podcast. We have a repeat guest with us today. Victoria Mexcur is back with us. And today we're going to talk a little more specifically about trauma and what it looks like in the days, weeks, months after trauma. I felt like it was really timely with the fires that have burned here in Nebraska. And I mean, it doesn't just pertain to the fires specifically, but because that's fresh on my mind, I wanted to have Victoria back to talk to us more about trauma. Welcome back.
Hi. Nice to be back, except for, it just stinks that it's under these kinds of circumstances. Even though I love talking about this stuff, it's still tough when it's right after something so difficult.
Yeah. So I guess you developed the one sheet that I have linked in the show notes of the last couple of weeks' podcast episodes. I would love for you to go over that with us here. Like, what does it look like for people immediately post-trauma? The phases that we kind of go through, like when can we expect the shit to hit the fan kind of thing? Like, tell us all the things.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's kind of interesting is that I want to give a little bit of a disclaimer that the phases that are on the sheet are from a direct, very specific situational trauma. So I'd say traumas that pack a punch. There are some chronic traumas that wouldn't necessarily fall under this category. So I kind of like to consider events, natural disasters, global situations and circumstances. So it's very directly impactful, and how we can kind of start seeing maybe some of the aftermath. It's very, very common, especially with natural disasters and things that are technically globally impactful, for this to fit more for people's life knowledge. So with the fire specifically, from friends, family, clients, I've kind of heard it's, what do we do now? It happened. What does it look like, moving forward? How do we know when things are kind of, quote, going back to normal or not? How do we make those distinctions? So it's really important to kind of think about this from days and weeks, week to weeks, weeks to months, months to years, and then 3+ years. So you're going to have the impact. The impact points has a reoccurring shock, a set point of fear and disbelief. It's very hard to think clearly. This is the full survival mode. I'm actually going to time out here for a second. For your listeners, I'd like for you to take care of yourself as I talk about this. If you could please just notice, hey, I'm really overwhelmed right now, or I just don't really want to listen to this, just right this second. If it feels too direct, if you're still kind of dealing with the survival stuff and getting things kind of going, please just take a pause, because this is really kind of hard to do multitasking. And so, yeah, I would really invite everybody to just take a breath. Notice what feels uncomfortable. If the stress becomes too unbearable, then, we need to take a minute and come back to this later. So we're going to have a lot of people that are going to be in the impact point and the heroic relief points with dealing with the fires right now. So the heroic, like, relief side of things can be days and weeks. There's a lot of adrenaline, there's a lot of action, there's a lot of neighbors helping, there's a lot of community help. I've had friends here in North Carolina ask, "Hey, Victoria, we know that, Nebraska is home for you. We heard about the fires. How can we help?" And I give them a list of resources for financial donations. There's community bonding that happens. There's a lot of busyness that can kind of like mask the level of grief that people are going to. This is kind of like our natural fight response to survive. And so that can kind of take weeks. And then we can experience like a honeymoon phase after that. It can be weeks to months where we're like, oh my goodness, things are okay. We're okay. We made it through. We're feeling optimistic that things are returning to some quote normal and that it's going to come back quickly. So there is kind of like this anticipation, like, oh my goodness, I'm so hopeful. We're going to get this done. We're going to do well. It's going to be great. Then after that, there's this phase called the disillusionment phase. I have it starred on the resource sheet because this is where there's going to be more like mental health problem peaks and our attention is drawn elsewhere. So we're not going to pay attention to some of our mental health needs during this point because reality sets in, aid fades. We're not seeing it on the news as much. We're kind of like having to deal with maybe some of the fallout of longer recovery during that time. So there could be a lot of anger. And then the impact of grief really shows because we don't have anything else really to focus on except for the here and now and the reality. So this is where community check-ins and really taking care of your mental health is going to be super important is a few months after. Reconstruction phase is anywhere from 1 to 5 years plus. This is kind of accepting that and rebuilding that this is kind of part of the new normal. We're participating in more healing. I want to make sure that I clearly say that healing is not linear. It has peaks and valleys. It's never going to be just the same for everybody. We want to find new meaning, new normals over time, and really kind of settle into the next phase of life post a traumatic event like that.
I want to go back to what you said about aid fades. Right now, the help is amazing. And there's a lot of financial donations, medicine for cows donations, hay donations, all the things coming in. Lots of love and support from online. And this is one thing that when we talk about the grief piece, when my dad died, the aid faded about 2 weeks after.
Right.
And we got all this stuff up front, and it was almost overwhelming. It wasn't almost, it was overwhelming, the amount of stuff we got. Specifically, paper plates.
And casseroles?
That wasn't as overwhelming as the paper plates. We had enough paper plates, and I think I might have mentioned this in last week's podcast episode, but we had enough paper plates to feed the entire 400 people that came to my dad's funeral dinner. And I brought paper plates home with me and fed all of my branding crews that year. And my brothers kept paper plates and my mom kept paper plates. So sometimes that aid right now can feel overwhelming, but then it stops.
Uh-huh.
And it's like you're expected to just move on with your life as if nothing happened.
Yeah.
And I'd never had any experience with that until my dad died, but now I can kind of see that happening with this trauma too. Like there's a lot of aid right now, and I have concerns for when that stops.
Yeah. So it's almost kind of cool and terrible at the same time that it would be nice if it were paper plates. Like, sure, in the beginning, that's an overabundance, but to your point, like you were able to eat off of those paper plates for a whole year, essentially, because it was overwhelming at first. You're right. Aid up front can be incredibly overwhelming, especially if it's not, parceled out over an extended period of time. And typically it isn't just paper plates. It's stuff that expires and,
Milk. Milk was another big one.
yeah.
Like gallons of white milk.
Ooh, that's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot. So, yeah, it is going to be kind of really noticeable when the aid fades. And what's even worse, and I'm going to say this delicately, if ranchers and farmers already struggle with asking for help, I can only imagine struggling to ask for help when you desperately need it 6 months after, 8 months after, a year after, both emotionally and literally. If, you're getting your aid in its entirety up front, you're like, I don't know what to do with all of this. It's a year's worth. I don't have a year's worth of storage. And this isn't a year's worth of being good to use.
Yeah, I mean, like the hay and all, like you said, like the hay's kind of like paper plates.
Yeah.
The money's kind of like paper plates. Like it all comes up front, but you can use it out. But also, like the love and support that's been coming in from everywhere, like the non-tangible aid
Yep.
that we have been receiving.
Yeah.
And when that fades,
It's devastating again.
because I mean, even in my experience with my dad dying, like that kind of petered out. Like I only had, like there was a lot of it in those first 2 weeks. And then there was only a couple of people that continuously checked in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I am aware of that. And Tom's aware of that. And so we will not stop checking in on our people.
Yeah.
But it will fade.
Yeah, it does. I actually do this myself, and I ask a lot of people to do it as well. Make an event on your calendar. We make events of all kinds. I usually put like a reminder, hey, check in on so and so, because you're right. It is incredibly important that they continue to care and be a part of the community. So if that means, hey, I don't want to get distracted by my own life, then let me put a reminder to also care about somebody else in a different community that might need it and more than likely will for sure need it. So yeah, I have calendar events. Check in on Jenna, check in on Taryn, check in on Jake. I will check in.
Similar or along the same vein, if you feel in your gut or like you have this thought that just appears in your mind that you should call somebody, call them.
Okay, funny enough, I call it the mental walk by. So like I literally will tell people, hey, you walked across my brain today. You just moseyed right from ear to ear. I'm making sure that I talk to you. And it's really kind of trippy and super cool that that's how important interconnectedness is, because it's not just a vibe.
It's real.
I think it's really like intrinsic.
Yeah, I cannot tell you the number of times where I've had, like, I feel it in my gut, like that tingle, like, oh, I need to call or check in on this person. And I do, and something big has happened in their life. Sometimes it's like a yay exciting thing, and sometimes it's not, but something big has happened. And I also have to admit that there are times that I shove that feeling down and I don't make the call or make the text. And then I find out later that something big happened and there was a reason I felt that.
Yeah.
This came to my mind as we were talking here, and it maybe is a little random, but still on topic. Talk to us about survivor's guilt, because I've had this conversation with a couple of people. Like, there are so many people in our community who weren't directly impacted by the fire, meaning the fire didn't come onto their property. It didn't get to their house. They didn't have to evacuate, all of that. And they are affected by the fire. Like, this is a community. Like, I think of our community having its own nervous system. And even though that body part wasn't affected or injured, it's still like we feel it throughout. So, talk to us about that.
Survivor's guilt is so tricky because it's minimizing your own personal experience of what you've gone through because you're thinking, well, somebody had it way worse. How can I feel bad about what I went through? And then the second one is a performance anxiety piece where I didn't do a good enough job. I need to do better. How can I help more? How can I do this? So it's essentially like a fight response and a nervous system activation that doesn't really have anywhere to go. So it's really overwhelming energy in the nervous system that is basically stuck. So what we end up coming up with is, how do I fix this? How do I help somebody? How do I do a better job? And then we're kind of like investing in ruminating quite a bit. And then that doesn't actually like help us. And therefore we get into that survivor's guilt. The other part that's really, really important is that I actually think it's more survivor's shame.
Yes. Oh, yes.
I would rather call it survivor shame than survivor's
Yes.
guilt.
I'm going to start calling it that
Do it. Let's do it.
because guilt means you did something wrong,
Exactly.
and shame says you're bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, if you were at home calving your cows and you couldn't get away to help the Red Cross cook meals, or you couldn't get down to where the fire was because maybe you don't have a fire rig, or maybe your fire rig was broke down, or whatever you were doing during the fires, wherever you were is exactly where you were supposed to be doing exactly what you were supposed to be doing.
Exactly. So I don't endorse the idea that, like we could have done more. You did the best that you could. You did what you needed to do. And most of the time, if we think about like, oh, I could have done more, anytime that we can kind of like think about that sentence, if it started with I could, I should, then we're already participating in some level of shame. And that's technically not my voice having that thought. It's an expectation set by some ideal somewhere that isn't helpful or supportive of me in my own journey or processing this trauma or, just simply existing in community. Yes, survivor's guilt is toxic. It's super harmful to some of, hands down, the most amazing people. Like, I feel the worst for anybody who has survivor's guilt, survivor shame, because it's not even theirs and they've done an amazing job and they just need to hear it over and over and over and over again. I will go blue in the face telling somebody how awesome they are.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. And we're totally changing it. It's survivor shame
Yes.
because you did nothing wrong.
Yeah. You did a very good job. You did the best that you could with what you had.
Mm-hmm.
And that was perfect.
Mm-hmm. So, what are some other things, like, as members of the community, what are some things that we can look out for in our fellow community members, in our friends, our family, as we make our way through the weeks and months post fire? Or, like this episode, we're talking about the fire, but really it applies to any
Everything.
situational trauma.
Absolutely. One of the things is if you see like a personality change. I think about people who are like really outgoing and then all of a sudden they're like, I'm not really interested in going out. Or if somebody is the opposite. So any kind of like super drastic, non-typical things that they may be going through behaviorally, that's a red flag for me. If people are not able to like reach out to other people, I do see that as a little bit of a flag. If they're more isolated, I guess, is how I would put that. If people are getting really agitated, if I'm actually going to say ruminating really heavily on the situation, then there is a stuck point that needs to kind of be supported. If there's changes in appetite, for instance, is kind of like an easier read. If people are eating or not eating, sleep is another one. If there's a lot of like hypervigilance or like chronic illness, if people are starting to get like more sick, I think about like stomach problems. I think about migraines and headaches. Those two are pretty consistent with like a nervous system that's overwhelmed. So I pay attention to that. The other side of it is if people are talking about really being hopeless and helpless, that is probably one of the biggest red flags. And at that point, I would consider, suicide assessments. So suicidality is a really important thing that needs to be very much paid attention to. On the resource sheet, I have the suicide hotline, the crisis hotline listed, I think in like 3 or 4 different places. That's how important I think it is. Yeah, it's just super important. The suicide crisis line is 988, so it's super easy. There is a Nebraska rural response hotline. I also have that number listed. That is for rural community members. And yeah, I've heard really good things about the use of that. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a suicidality. It can just be like, hey, I'm having this kind of crisis. I need somebody to talk to right now. So that's really good.
While we're on the topic of hotlines, I knew about this number before, but it's only available in certain states. And I didn't know what would happen if you called it and your state wasn't one that had it. But I learned today that even if you call outside of a state that it's in, it's like Nebraska does not have, it's called the agri-stress hotline.
Yeah. That's a good one.
And Nebraska doesn't technically have it, but they will not turn you away if you call the number. So I will also put that number in the show notes.
Yeah. Those are all really helpful.
You were talking about sleep.
Yes.
My sleep has been so terrible.
I bet.
Like waking up at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yep. That's a cortisol hour.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Actually, the other morning, Tom left early to go ship some calves and like calves that we had sent to the backgrounder, and they were going to go on to the feedlot. And so he just went up to the backgrounder to help him with paperwork and stuff. And he left early. And when I woke up at 5, I was like kind of put out because he didn't wake me up to say goodbye. So I texted him, I'm like, did you leave already? And he's like, yeah, I didn't want to wake you because you were finally sleeping.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh, thank you. Now I'm not mad anymore.
Yeah. That's so sweet.
He's like, I left you a note.
Yeah. Sleep is really brutal after situational trauma, especially one that also happened at night.
Mm-hmm.
So with the fires, because everything was essentially at night, it would be double, if not triple hard to sleep. So that would be your peak hypervigilance. So generally, we want to invite safe vigilance. Here's like a little therapy, tidbit. Hypervigilance is a bit much, right? Like we're kind of doing it too much. We're exhausted. We're just like spinning out on the things that we're paying attention to. Safe vigilance is a restorative practice. I don't recommend it like 100% of the time. But if we're trying to like taper it back a little bit, finding a safe vigilance is incredibly helpful. So like, hey, do we have the fire extinguishers? Do we have this? You run through your safe points and then you can say, I've done the safe vigilance. I don't have to do extra. So we kind of create like an internal boundary where we're giving ourselves permission to be vigilant without going a little bit more overboard, because that's the trauma that is creating that system. The other part is sleep hygiene. We need to do things that are supportive of sleep more attentively. So, what that might look like is going to bed at the same time. It might be not watching TV in your bed. It might be not having your phone on or watching, doom scrolling. It might also be eating at a certain time. I don't know if people really pay attention to this, but your sleep cycle actually starts at 4 to 5 p.m. It is not something that starts at 10 or 11. It is a lot sooner than that. So, starting at what time you might have dinner, if you're eating sugars or anything super carbed right before you go to bed. I'm really loving a good sleepy time tea. That stuff is very nice. Add some honey because it doesn't taste great, but sleepy time tea feels good.
I used to do this every single night. And then after my big surgery last year, I kind of got away from it because I didn't pack it with me. But having a glass of tart cherry juice before bed.
Yes. Yeah. So, whatever your sleep hygiene routine is, we want to kind of like keep that consistent. And lastly, I know that people don't recommend taking naps, but when you're in like the honeymoon phase and it's like right after a situational event, take a nap. It might help your nervous system just kind of like woosah a little bit, especially if you're having to be vigilant. Now, it means that you're going to have to do some work with your sleep cycle later on. But right now, the priority is, oh my gosh, I'm really tired. This is a safe time for me to rest and sleep. Then we want to make sure that that is part of the recovery moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, that night and early morning of the Ashby and minor fires, I was like, I do not know how I'm going to be able to sleep at the same time as Tom at night. And then we found out that the feds were driving around the fire line at night, so that helped.
Yeah.
But honestly, still, the most comfortable or like the safest, what feels the safest time to sleep is during the day.
Yeah.
And like, obviously, I don't sleep all day because I'm awake right now, but
Yeah.
I have taken some naps.
Yeah. That is really important. And you bring up a point about the safe vigilance. If sometimes we need to switch up like where we sleep so that way we can have a quote point of proof that we are okay, that's also really important. I kind of actually think about nightlights for people who have darkness trauma type of stuff where that the darkness is a trigger. Nightlights are actually really helpful and supportive to be like, here's a point of proof that I'm okay, especially if like you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? That is like a direct line of sight for, okay, proof I'm okay. So there's like a safe vigilance point that we can kind of like gravitate towards. And so it's kind of finding workable, quote, like solutions, even though there's nothing wrong, to help your nervous system see that it's okay right now, that you needed to be hypervigilant then. We just don't need to do it 100% now. So, how we can kind of like start helping the nervous system kind of calm down a little.
Hmm. Okay, so like you mentioned, and I've talked about this, the moral fire started during the day.
Yeah.
But for those of us who have been affected by the Ashby and minor fires and the other two fires that burned that night in our area that were not on the Watch Duty app, what about nightmares?
Yeah. Ooh, nightmares are going to happen. I really want to normalize that for people who have them. Nightmares are normal. They are a biological factor of your body trying to understand what happened. So it's a processing that happens in your body. And so we just want to be really patient and gentle with that because your body has essentially been overwhelmed and survived. So, in order for it to figure out that nothing is happening like in the here and now, it has to digest it. So, part of your brain doing that is essentially trying to lock away some of it in long-term memory and quote unquote dump the yuckiness out. And the only way that our bodies can do that without us intervening is at night when we're sleeping. Our bodies get to have the hot sweats. It gets to be cold. It gets to, essentially like panic a little bit without us being involved because it's processing the crisis as it needs to. So while it's incredibly difficult and super stressful and agonizing, it is part of our normal function that your body goes to. Now, obviously, like we want to make sure that we're getting restful sleep. And so if nightmares become really problematic, then you need to talk to a doctor and go to therapy to help support that trauma getting digested and processed.
What are some things that we can do like in the middle of the night, in the immediate moment, whether, because I'm not having nightmares, I just am awake at like the cortisol hour.
Yeah.
But if we're being awakened by nightmares or just stress hormones, like what are some things in the immediate that we can do to help get our bodies back to a place of rest?
Yeah. So, first and foremost, give your body and your brain permission to just exist. Like, I really like telling people, and I do this myself, okay, my body's trying to take care of me right now. That, for some reason, just helps offload, a certain level of judgment. Like, oh my gosh, I can't freaking sleep. This is ridiculous. Why is this happening? No, you know what? Time out. My body's doing a really good job trying to take care of me right now. And what we have gone through, that was a lot. Let me give it a minute to kind of like settle out. Taking some regulatory breaths, having tangible, like safe points, like grab points. I kind of think about the night lights. I think about having a glass of water by your bed. I kind of think about fans. Some people really like the sound of fans. So anything that can kind of be grounding points to get you to see that you are okay when you're kind of like, in sleep wake mode. So those are two. The other one is if you're like really not able to fall back asleep after that, go wake up. Go take a warm shower. Go sit on your couch. Don't lay in bed and start spinning out on the nightmare that you're having. Go move your body in a different way to help offset what was happening in your system.
Okay. Can we also talk about how crying and tears are the same? Like it's your body trying to move this through. And I just heard from somebody the other day, they said, I'm going to try not to cry. And I was like, why? Let that out, man. I'm here for it.
Listen, emotional constipation is the bane of my existence. I normalize tears. It is a central nervous system, like an autonomic nervous system response that we have like mastered into controlling. Sure, sometimes like bawling, snot crying is not very productive to us, but sometimes we need to bawl, snot cry.
I would say it's probably more annoying than it is unproductive.
Exactly. I agree. I mean, I just got done crying like an hour ago, so I feel great
You
now.
look fantastic for did you snot cry? Because when
No,
I
no, no,
snot
no.
cry
No, it wasn't snot crying.
okay.
It was cathartic.
Okay, because like when I snot cry, I do not look that good.
Thanks. No, crying is part of an autonomic response. In fact, there has been a lot of research that talks about the fingerprints of tears. Tears have toxins that have been excreted from your body. So if you're sad, there is a fingerprint to a sad tear. If you're happy, there is a fingerprint to your happy tear. And so, really, it's quite important for your body to help regulate by crying. I will never stop anybody from crying ever, including in public. It's just a thing that needs to happen sometimes, and I will normalize that. So, one of the things that I actually have done to normalize crying is that I call it your face taking a shit.
That goes right along with emotional constipation.
Exactly. I think if you have issues with like bodily function, then this one probably isn't for you. But it is really kind of normalizing to think about like we go to the bathroom, we, have other functions, we have to blow our nose, we sneeze, we yawn, we do all of these things. Tears are literally just coming out of our eyeballs. Allergy season, tears coming out of our eyeballs, not a big deal. So sometimes when I have had people who are just snotball crying, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. This was really embarrassing." I'd be like, "No. Did it feel good for your face to take a shit?" And they look at me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, actually, yes. I'm gonna start calling it that because that feels more normal." Okay, whatever works for this to be part of our normal functioning, I'm game for. It works really great with the guys.
You know what I sometimes do? It's my emotional laxative, if you will, is I will put on music that I know will get me to crying. If I can feel that I'm emotionally constipated, I will do that
Yeah, that's a good one.
and just let it go. Like on my drive yesterday, I didn't mean to do it, just happened because I was listening to Sirius, but the acoustic version of Wonder by Natalie Merchant came on, and
Yeah.
that was my, like, pump up jam for, like I listened to it on repeat while I was taking my Hibiclens shower before my big surgery last year. I listened to it throughout the year. I don't know, Spotify, when it gives you the Wrapped at the end was like, "You're the number 1 listener of Wonder." No, they didn't really say that, but I had a lot of listens to Wonder. And so that came on Sirius yesterday, and it was the acoustic version, so it was even more moving for me, and I just let the tears come down.
Yeah.
Emotional laxative.
Yeah. It's really, really great to be that connected to yourself, to be able to cry and have feelings demonstrated, not just feel them, but sometimes they do need to do that. Crying, yawning, digestive stuff, like if you're passing gas and all that, if you get cold, if you get hot, are all nervous system re-regulations that your body naturally goes through when things happen. It's actually really common for trauma responses, especially traumas that have like been worked out and processed.
When you were talking about getting hot and cold, I was thinking about, like, sweating,
Yeah.
stress sweating.
Yep. Stress sweating is part of a response system. Yeah. Night sweats, cold sweats, adrenaline sweats.
And they all smell different.
Mhm.
They got a fingerprint too.
Any water that comes out of your body.
All of this information has been I've found it really helpful. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with that maybe we haven't covered regarding situational trauma and the days and weeks and months afterwards?
Yeah. I kind of want to bring up like things that you can kind of like do on a day-to-day basis a little bit. And just a simple reminder, give yourself time, at least 12 to 24 months. I know that that feels like a really, really long time, but recovery isn't linear. We're not going to have like, okay, we're good after 6 months. We can see the grass growing or, this thing has changed and we're back, quote, back to normal. That's not how this works. So be patient with yourself and reach out. The other thing that I really value when working with situational trauma is having a boundary or a space for when to talk about it and when not to. I think that sometimes when we're overloaded with our own grief and our own trauma, and we have somebody else who like really wants to talk about it, but we've already spent time talking about it, it kind of like creates a cycle that we're trying really hard not to get into. And so have designated times and be respectful of each other. Like, hey, maybe I don't need to talk about this right this second. Maybe I can set up a time with them so we can have a heart-to-heart conversation about this. Feel okay to be like, hey, I'm a little overwhelmed with my own grief. Can we talk about this later? Or I really want to be invested in our conversation. Can we talk about this now? Having that distinction is really, really important for recovery. The other two things are set one small, achievable goal each week and do something that you enjoy every day. As little as having a cup of coffee and your favorite chair or snuggling up with your favorite blanket. Do something that you enjoy every day and set one achievable goal every week that you can kind of like check off the list that maybe even meets the need of something to enjoy.
Love that. Thank you for coming on and being a guest again.
Absolutely.
And also, huge thank you for putting together that resource sheet and the info sheet and all of that. And all of that will still be linked in the show notes this week. So if you missed it the last couple weeks, you can go check that out. But thank you for putting that all together for us.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody has any questions or just wants to reach out and be like, hey, this is something that I've been thinking about. Can you answer this real quick? Or, hey, I'm looking for a therapist to work with this, particularity. I'm more than happy to be the resource to coordinate that kind of stuff as it's needed.
Okay, perfect. And we'll have your contact information in the show notes also. So
Absolutely.
if you would like to connect with Victoria, you can go there and find that. And thank you again for coming on.
Yay! Absolutely.
And with that, until next time, draw good movement. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm so grateful for you. If you found value in this episode, I'd love for you to share with others who might also benefit from tuning in. Share by word of mouth, send it in a text, take a screenshot and post it on social media, or share however you prefer. And if you haven't already, hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Until next time, draw good movement.